As I came home, I was planning to get some rest, but all I could think about was showing Elliot to my family and telling my friends about his birth. Making the most of technology, I got in touch with my parents over Skype. They were really happy to see Elliot. My mother told me she found it a bit weird seeing me with my baby, but that I already looked very much at such ease with him. We discussed the plans for her next visit. She was going to fly over in 3 days to come and spend a week with us. Her assistance was going to be extremely useful. For the rest of the day, I tried to rest in between Elliot's feeds, but without much success. It was only when I went to bed for the night that I managed to get to sleep. Elliot woke up hungry around 2 in the morning, so I fed him and then cradled him as he dozed back off. As soon as he had got back off to sleep, I no longer felt tired at all. All I wanted to do was to go on Facebook to put up photos of Elliot's birth and share my news. And so that is what I did, right in the middle of the night, without Gerhard's knowledge. He would certainly have tried to convince me to go back to bed. I stayed awake until Elliot's next feed, when I realized that I really should catch up on some sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I got ready for the first follow-up visit from our midwife, Holly. I was very pleased to see her. She asked me a few questions about Elliot, how the breastfeeding was going, and how I was getting on. And then she examined Elliot and weighed him. He had lost a little weight since his birth, but that was not unusual. He would certainly gain it again in the next few days. We then spent some time talking about all that had happened during the birth. She made me realize what extraordinary strength I had shown, and that I could not have avoided the medical interventions. We had tried everything to have a home birth, but we had made the right choice to go to hospital for Elliot's safety and my own. In fact, if a similar situation presented itself in a subsequent birth, I should be quicker to agree to go to hospital rather than persevering at home. For the 2 days after Holly's visit, I felt full of energy, and now that I was a new mother, my happiness was complete. During the day, I would try to rest at the same time as Elliot, but I found it so difficult to do so. I was too exhilarated to sleep. Instead, I spent lots of time on Facebook, replying to people's comments or putting up new photos. Right in the middle of the night, between 2 of Elliot's feeds, I even wrote a 4-page email all in one go to a friend to whom I felt a sudden urge to write. I was fascinated by the ease with which the words came to my mind. Then we had Holly's second home visit. She weighed Elliot and noticed that he had not yet returned to the weight he was born at, despite my having no difficulty feeding him. She suggested I go to a breastfeeding clinic to get specialized advice and hear some suggestions. She made the appointment for us. We were to go to the clinic the following day, making sure Elliot was hungry so that I could feed him while I was there. That way, it would be easier for the breastfeeding consultant to check my technique and correct me if necessary. Holly also took the chance to ask me a few questions to check up on how I was feeling. She seemed a little bit surprised when I told her how I felt in an excellent mood and full of energy. She advised me to take a gravel pill to help me sleep, as my body needed a chance to rest and recover. I then asked her how long I would have to wait before the tear was fully healed, so that I could start having sexual relations again. When she told me that it could be between 4 and 6 weeks, I remember thinking that it seemed like a long time to wait. I didn't tell her directly, but my libido was through the roof, and I felt it would be hard to wait quite so long to satisfy my desires, which I felt was a little strange after I had just given birth. My mother arrived the same day. I was pleased to see her and enjoy the tasty meals which she fixed for us. I was delighted to eat with a full appetite once again, without my stomach feeling constricted. And there were so many other little pleasures to enjoy now that I no longer had such a belly. Taking a bath with my whole body under the water, having a small glass of real beer, and sleeping up close against my husband. I felt an absolute happiness and wanted to make the most of every moment of joy. I was thankful to God for my life's beautiful gifts, a wonderful husband and a healthy baby. I felt utterly in love with them both, and I was so glad to share this joy with my mother. That evening, while I was in bed, a sudden feeling of anxiety overwhelmed me. I also felt a little dizzy. I attributed it straight away to the little glass of beer which I had allowed myself with supper after feeding Elliot. I thought it was probably the effect of alcohol on my body, which was quite clearly exhausted. I stayed lying down and tried to calm my mind, which was running wild. I remember feeling a kind of panic at being alone in my room. Although I felt quite afraid, I didn't mention it to Gerhard, and I managed to fight against it by telling myself over and over not to worry. Sleep would do me lots of good. Fortunately, I fell asleep quickly. I woke up in fine form the next day for our visit to the breastfeeding clinic. I was advised to always offer both breasts to Elliot and to feed him every 2 hours for the next 24 hours to help him regain some weight. They also corrected my position for feeding him from my left breast. The consultants were very welcoming, and I was sure that their advice would be useful. They wanted to see me the next day to check if Elliot had regained some weight. And so, 24 hours of rather intense breastfeeding ensued, but I don't remember it being tiresome, even at night. When we went back to the clinic to weigh him, Elliot had already gained a few extra ounces. They asked me to come back a week later to make sure his weight was still rising. I felt in great form for the whole week that my mother was with us. The only thing bothering me was my tear as it healed. To avoid the pain, I had to stay in bed almost all the time and not use the stairs. This was frustrating because it was a lovely temperature outside, and I would have loved to take Elliot out for a walk. My mother was always on my case, making sure I got some rest and slept at the same time as Elliot during the day. The gravel pills were helpful on several occasions to help me sleep, but I kept feeling a real urge to do more than just stay in bed. When Elliot was asleep and I was alone in my room without my mother or Gerhard, I would often grab my laptop and go on Facebook. I remember writing lots of comments and replying to questions from friends to whom I had never written in a personal way before. Ideas came to mind so easily and swiftly that I even found myself writing a children's story and a speech for my Toastmasters club in the middle of the night. As soon as I had finished feeding Elliot, I would try to go back to sleep, but my thoughts would run wild, and I couldn't stop myself from writing down everything which came to my mind. I was fascinated by the speed with which so many rhymes formed suddenly in my head. I was convinced that my story was brilliant and that my speech would be a powerful one. I was amazed by Gerhard's manner with Elliot. Right from the beginning, he had felt very much at ease looking after him. He changed his diaper, gave him a bath, and even went out walking with him in the small hours of the morning to help him get back to sleep. He was also highly attentive towards me. I thought perhaps that wasn't so strange after all, that my libido was sky-high. Then the week my mother was spending with us came to an end. We were going to see her and the rest of the family around a month later, for the long weekend over Thanksgiving. I couldn't wait to have everyone with us. Our third visit to the breastfeeding clinic confirmed that Elliot had indeed returned to the weight he was born at. and that he was continuing to demonstrate normal growth. We arranged a final appointment a week later to make sure he was still growing as he should be. When Holly made her fourth home visit, she was glad to know that everything was returning to normal with Elliot. We were going to see her 2 weeks later at a midwifery clinic for another routine postnatal checkup.